So, welcome friends to online event organized by Smart Methodology, and I'm happy to introduce our speaker for today. Berhard Richka is Director of Corporate Technology at Swiss Steel Group since 2017. He's responsible for major investments projects, the implementation of best practices, and the development of the company decarbonization roadmap. His contribution to the development of sustainable technology and the reduction of the carbon footprint in the steel industry has been widely recognized in the same sector. Under his leadership, Swiss Steel Group became the first steel producer whose decarbonization targets were validated by the Science Based Targets Initiative, confirming the company's commitment to sustainable development. Berhard Richka plays a key role in transforming Swiss Steel Group towards sustainable and environmentally friendly steel production, driving innovation and reducing the company's carbon footprint. Berhard is a prominent speaker at international metallurgical conferences, and I am very pleased that Berhard Richka has agreed to speak at the online event for today. Thanks, Mr. Berhard, for your contribution, and now I give the floor to you.
Okay, Andre, thank you very much. Hello to you and hello to the audience as well. Thank you for providing me the floor. My presentation will take approximately 30 minutes, and I have to make a small disclaimer, some explanations. First of all, I will refer many times to Germany because this is where our main production sites are. So apologize for the international listeners. And the second point is that our companies, our steel plants, we have altogether six, excuse me, that they are all producing special steel, and special steel is not representative for the entire steel making. Okay, then
Friends, energy consumption is a critical parameter for the efficiency of steel production in electric arc furnaces. This is especially important for regions like Europe, where electricity prices are extremely high. However, this issue is also relevant for countries with lower electricity costs. Excessive energy consumption impacts the cost of steel production and leads to unnecessary CO2 emission from electricity generation. Traveling to steel plant worldwide, I see how far many steel mills are from operating at optimal efficiency. We often encounter energy consumption rates of 500 kWh per ton and higher. To address this, the Smart Methodology team has developed a rapid furnace optimization service. In just 3 days of work, our specialists will fine-tune your furnace to meet global efficiency standards. We will help you increase melting speed, reduce costly electrode consumption, improve refractory durability, and maximize metal yield. All these factors directly affect production costs. Our experts have successfully completed over 20 projects, achieving performance improvement in every case. If your furnace consumes more than 380 kWh per ton when using scrap metal, or more than 450 kWh per ton when using 100% of the iron discharge, it's time to contact us. We also invite agents familiar with top management in the steel industry to collaborate with us. To learn more, scan the QR code to visit our website. Also, you can find the website link in the description of this video. Enjoy watching.
Steel making. Okay, then let's go ahead. The agenda looks like this. We talk a little bit about the net zero targets of the countries to begin with. Then a small 1 minute about the company profile of Swiss Steel Group, and then the major shifts in steel making routes, what's happening, what started a few years ago and what's going on right now. And then the decarbonization opportunities we have at SSG, this is Swiss Steel Group, but the decarbonization opportunities, they are more or less common for all steel makers, which is good. And the two main levers we have is either to continue electrification or to go with hydrogen as a replacement for natural gas. And finally, again, from the European perspective, the precondition which we steelmakers would need to have a successful transition. Yeah. net zero emissions by country may not be new to you, but if you look at the timeline, we are now in 2025. This stretches all the way to 2070, and the first real industrial powerhouse which has pledged to become net carbon net zero is Germany. Here we see in 2025, followed by Japan and the USA in 2050, and the big newcomers. Well, China is not a newcomer, but India will be. They have pledged to become carbon neutral 2060 or even later. Now, there is obviously, to my opinion, there is a misconception. Germany, and I was born in Germany, I know this country a little bit. Germany will not be achieving this ambitious goal. And also, since if you look at the United States, since Donald Trump entered office a few days or weeks ago, first thing is that he withdrew from the Paris climate uh, thing. So this is all bad news for the decarbonization we have, and but that's just a fact we have to accept. How much are the carbon emissions annually? Here you see 27 or 30 gigatons. I've also seen diagrams with 35 or 40 gigatons per year, which are being released. These higher numbers rather refer to the equivalent of CO2, which also includes greenhouse gases like unburned methane and others. Yeah. But the absolute number is not very important. Important is that the industrial part is a major contributor. So it's a good 1/3 or even more. And if you know that, for example, our products in the steel industry, they also need to be shipped somewhere, obviously that also the industry takes part of the emissions which are here allocated to transport. If we zoom a little bit into the industry itself, again, we see that my industry, so the steel industry, uh, produces approximately a quarter of the total industrial emissions. And this is supported by the diagram here on the right side, where you see the steel industry in comparison with others like oil refinery or the chemical industry, cement, and so on. Also, here is steel is the unfortunate leader, I call it. And if you now acknowledge that, for example, from the lime industry, from non-ferrous or ferroalloys, or from ceramics, a lot of products also go into the steel industry. They are consumed by us. Then the leadership, the unfortunate leadership would still extend. But it's not only the industry itself. If you look at this diagram, we see the per capita emission, the tons per year over the population. And you see that the y-axis, this is the amount per capita, and the area, so the integral highlighted by each color here, this is the population of each country. And it's unsurprising, for example, China is the major emittent of CO2 emissions, although per capita, other countries like Saudi Arabia or USA or Australia are much higher. We also see that the x-axis is not, the picture is incomplete because we stop at 4 billion. But as we know, our population worldwide is not 4 billion. We are, I think, more than 8 billions by now. And major countries like Nigeria, Pakistan, Bangladesh, which have a huge population and which also want to be part of the industrial cycle, they are not part of this diagram yet. But this means that there is a constant shift from the lower right to the upper left, because in the upper left, this is where you either have extreme weather conditions, hot or cold weather, where you have industrialization, where you have a high agglomeration of wealth. And it's natural that those countries which are not part of this exclusive group want to be moving in this direction. And all this is working against our decarbonization or CO2 reduction targets. What you will not hear from me today is the natural absorption, which I personally find very compelling and very interesting, so that by enhancing or promoting natural absorption of CO2, we can also save annually a huge amount of CO2 emissions. This can be by sequestration. This is a modern farm, not modern farming, but regenerative farming, like a no-tilling. This can be either can happen on land, it can happen on the sea by algae farms, or it's somewhere in the middle where you have land and sea, peatland restoration, wetlands, like mangroves and so on. So there is also a kind of luckily, a natural possibilities where we can try to enhance those rather than paving huge areas with asphalt and so on by 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 looking at these areas. The lower right picture here is very interesting because this shows an initiative, so the Green Belt Road in China, which started in 1978, and where the Chinese government has pledged to build 100 billion trees by 2050. So per Chinese person, approximately 80 trees, and they have made huge progress. And also this stop, or the main purpose that time was not to uh, reduce CO2 emissions, because in the 70s nobody was talking about it. It was rather to keep the Gobi Desert from expanding. Yeah? Uh, so this is actually a fortunately happening that now, of course, the efforts to curtail the desert is also producing a absorption of a natural absorption of CO2. Now, very quick about Swiss Steel Group. We are not well known. We are 6 melt shops, 2 in Germany, 1 in France, 1 in Switzerland, 1 in the US, in Chicago, 1 in Canada, close to Montreal, and we are 7,600 employees. We produce approximately 1.2, 1.3 million tons of exclusively special steel. And what is special steel for us? It's engineering steel, which you find, for example, in mobility, in your cars, in aviation, in train solutions. We make a stainless steel and also quite a significant amount of tool steel. So we are matrix organized, and our products are most of the time, I would say 95, 90, no, 98, 99%. These are semi-finished products. So bar in coils, wire rod, or blocks, which are machined or peeled or whatever, and they go to the customers, who then produce the final products. So turnover per year is 3.5 billion euros. And here you see the segments where my company works in. Big portion is mobility. So from our steel, approximately 190 kilograms would fit into an average combustion car, with 200 kilos for a diesel engine, but only 110 kilos for an electric vehicle, mainly because there will be no transmission, or a very, very simple transmission. Special steel means you have a lot of production steps, and that's also, in terms of CO2, quite a disadvantage. All plants, let's say, if you look at a rebar steel maker who makes simple construction, if you make construction steel, we all have in common the melt shop, the upfront, you have your scrap yard, electric arc furnace, ladle furnace, and casting machines. And then typically it's being hot rolled, hot charged to the rolling mill, and then it's dispatched to the customer as a final product. And this is not the case in special steel making, where you most of the time have ingot teaming for big sizes. In addition to continuous casting, you have remelting, which is highly intensive. You have rolling and forging, and then all the downstream starts, which is for us a heat treatment. I think in our group, we have 400 heat treatment furnaces. We have then pickling and uh, finishing. This can be peeling and uh, drawing, and ultimately testing. So all of our products, because before they are being shipped to the customers, they are subject to surface treatment and internal inspection by ultrasonic. So the upstream process, of course, all of our plants use electric arc furnace. So we do not employ blast furnace technology, converters, or induction furnaces. And that's why the upstream process is already electrified. And only the downstream process with forge furnaces, reheating furnaces, or heat treatment furnaces, this is where we at the moment, most of the time, utilize gas-fired furnaces. If you want to reduce your CO2 footprint, you have to know where it comes from. And in our case, it's like this. It's a scope 3 is the major portion. And scope 3, you know, there are 14 or 15 subcategories in scope 3. For us, the major contributors are 3.1. These are the ferroalloys, which have a terrible footprint, but they are necessary because we make a lot of alloyed and stainless steel. Some of our grades have less than 50% iron. And then 3.3 is the CO2 emission related to energy, which we also need. So if you extract gas or oil from the soil, also this has some CO2 emissions. Good. A new chapter, what's happening in the steelmaking industry. Those who work in it, they know that there's a transition right now happening from blast furnaces to electric arc furnaces. But let's have a look at the overview. On the left diagram, we see that converter shops and blast furnaces versus electric arc furnaces. These are the two major technologies nowadays. Probably it's not justified, it's not true in India. India, for example, traditionally, they employ a lot of induction furnaces, which are also quite attractive for CO2 reduction. But the major part is the blue part here, a blast furnace, followed by converter shops. China is the leader with 91%. Now it's getting less and less. Also, China wants to electrify. And on the other side, the yellow part, this is the electric arc furnaces. And there's Turkey and USA, they are leading. So we have a portion of 71 or 70% of steel making in these countries comes from scrap-based electric arc furnaces. This is also not surprise. Let's have a look at the scrap availability. We see that already for many, many decades, countries like Japan, Europe, or USA, we already have a quite high amount of scrap. And this scrap we are utilizing in our electric arc furnaces. Whereas if you take a look at China, for example, they started to industrialize significantly in the 90s. And there is no end of life scrap available, and it starts coming back now. So which means if you look at the share from 2025 until 2050, a huge amount of end of life scrap will come back in China, and this will go hand in hand with shifting more to electric arc furnace based on scrap. End of life scrap, what is the end of life scrap? How long is the life for scrap? If you look at your car, let's say a car has a lifetime of 10 years. In case my wife is driving, it's only 2 or 3 years. But bridges, for example, or construction have 50 years before the steel comes back. And this is what's happening now. Here on the left side, we have the major part of steel making. In the center is the blast furnace. For the blast furnace, what goes into the blast furnace, it's iron ore, it's a coal, it's limestone. Coal is first baked into coke. And that's a problem. How much coke do we need? A modern blast furnace has approximately 330 kilograms of coke per ton of hot metal. But you also see less efficient furnaces with 700 and 800 kilograms of coke. And all this coke in the end is collected here on top, either as a CO2 or as CO, carbon monoxide. And then it's later electrified, burned into CO2. And that's why this kind of steel making has such a high CO2 footprint of 2,300 kilograms per ton of steel. Of course, we also burn down the 4.3% of carbon coming from the hot metal in the converter, which adds another 43 kilos of C, which with a multiplication factor of 3 will be the 120, 130 kilos of CO2. But the major part in these 2.3 tons is coming from the blast furnace. Picture looks different if you have an electric arc furnace being fed by scrap. But the scrap we will see later that scrap at the moment is insufficient in quantity. So we still need to feed our steel making cycle constantly by iron ore. And since the iron ore, you cannot melt it in the furnace, we need the DRI plant, either by Matrix or by HYL, where you reduce the iron ore to an iron, I would say, with a high metallization of 95%. And to do so, you need to reduce it with either a natural gas. This is the case this is an established process happening all over Middle East. You can start in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar Steel, in UAE, in Emirates Steel, in Hadid. So this is a proven process which would already bring your footprint from 2,300 kilos to approximately 1,400 kilos. And as a second step, if you want to reduce the iron ore with hydrogen, green hydrogen, instead of natural gas, then you would go again to much less, more dramatic CO2 emission. Yeah. There are just two problems. One problem is seen on this side. This is a traditional route. Blast furnace feeds the BOF shop, and a blast furnace has been around for more than 100 years. It's a very forgiving process. It can use all kinds of iron ore from a low grade, when I say low grade with respect to iron content, to a high grade. However, if we want to close down this route, and this is what's happening in Europe, especially in Germany, we started with Salzgitter, we have Saarstahl, we have ThyssenKrupp. ThyssenKrupp is a little bit different, but then we have to move either to this process, and this is the one I described before in the Middle East, where you have a DRI plant, which is reducing the iron ore with a natural gas. And most of the time, since both the DRI plant and the electric or the melt shop, they are adjacent, so near to each other, you have a hot charging, a direct link to the electric arc furnace. So this means you have bunkers on top of the electric arc furnace and can feed the DRI with 500, 600 degrees, which is making the furnace much faster. Problem is that this process direct link needs high grade iron ore of 68% or even higher iron. And if we see the quote of a BHP manager, he says there is simply not enough high quality iron ore suitable for efficient DRI production to meet the global steel demand. So this means that not all blast furnaces can go to the route which we have already now in the Middle East. This means we need here to go to the middle, the central part, where we have an electric smelter, which is in between the BOF shop and the DRI plant. So you have a DRI plant which is fed with lower grade iron ore. The output it's kind of a pre-reduction. The output goes in a solid state to the electric smelting, where we make it liquid, and from there into the BOF shop. The second problem of closing blast furnaces is the availability of hydrogen. So again, sorry, I'm focusing on Europe. We have different possibilities to source green hydrogen. We know inside Europe, we don't have favorable conditions like enough sun or strong wind. And that's why we have a matrix here where we see what is my LCOE, this is a levelized cost of electricity. And which country or where could I source my green hydrogen? So I look at the cost of electricity, the production capacity. If I'm lucky, I get some local subsidies, and then I want to see the country where I invest, how stable is it? And as an example, Norway scores quite high. Yeah? And for example, other example, if you look in Iraq, also there in Iraq, you would have low, so favorable conditions in terms of cost of electricity, but you never know. There will be no subsidies. And as for to political stability, I don't want to talk bad about the country, but I would put more faith in a country like Norway. So this is a decision matrix we need to take and to source the hydrogen. The second thing is if we need small quantities of hydrogen, the cheapest source would be Norway. But when it comes to higher quantities, approximately, let's say, for example, 10 million tons, and that's what we would need if we want to decarbonize the European steel industry, suddenly other players, in this case Algeria, would become more cost efficient, but still 1.8 kilos of $1.8 per kilo hydrogen or $55 per megawatt hours is more what we pay today for the natural gas. For example, I can tell you in Switzerland, natural gas costs approximately $45 per megawatt hours. In Canada, where we have our other melt shop, we pay 15 to 20 US dollars per megawatt hours. What are the circular opportunities which we have? And this is an overview, and I will make a deep dive into one scrap or unalloyed and alloyed scrap. You know, we are all scrap based. We don't feed our furnaces with iron ore. And we will see we recycle refractory, for example, from our electric arc furnaces, from our ladles. We have a subcontractor who demolishes the bricks. He cleans them, and they are separated or segregated and screened and go into new refractories again. We have here a recycling rate of up to 70% for our sidewall bricks in the electric arc furnace. They are magnesia carbon. We also use a high amount of secondary aluminum, which is mainly crushed aluminum cans. We recycle dust. Why do we recycle? We recirculate dust from the electric arc furnace. Why do we do this? Because some of our steel contains zinc, and zinc vaporizes at 915 or whatever degrees. So during the electric arc furnace process, and we find it in the backhouse again, but the amount of zinc is not high enough. It's 20-25%. That's why we collect this dust and send it again into the electric arc furnace to artificially increase the zinc to a level that we can give it, let's say, more or less cost neutral to other processing companies instead of landfilling. We have not yet started to use a shredded plastic in our electric arc furnace for slag forming. This is something we are looking into it, and we'll also make a small deep dive and introduce this Issuing product to you. Scrap opportunities. I have to speed up a little bit. Do you see the cycle here? Steel production. We send our semis to the manufacturer who makes, let's say, a car. But part of, for example, his punching process is coming back to us. This is a good and clean scrap. We call it pre-consumer scrap because it never goes to the customers. And this is a nice scrap which is low in copper and tramp elements which you don't want. And here we have a specification. We know what's inside. On the other hand, when you finish your car and the car is going to a scrap yard, then we are talking about post-consumer scrap, and this is a kind of mainly a scrap mix where you don't know how much copper is inside, how much molybdenum, and so on, and you also don't know what is the amount of what is the density of this scrap. So. And then, of course, the question is, can you turn post-consumer scrap into pre-consumer scrap? There is a company Usually I don't make any commercials, but this is, in this case, it's a TSR in Duisburg in Germany, where they have commissioned a new shredder. So the material is coming here, is being shredded into small pieces, and then it is tested by LIPS technology, which is a laser-induced breakdown spectrography. So this means actually the pieces are analyzed, each of the pieces is analyzed and then sorted later on by copper, by moly, and so on, which means in the end there comes a product which is clean and which gives the steelmaker or the customer like us, it gives us a specification. So we know exactly how much of detrimental elements are inside this. We also hedge on the other side alloy scrap because there is a spread. We can use nickel, chromium, molybdenum by either ferroalloys, or we can buy alloy scrap, or we can take it from our own shops and classify them. This is a logistic nightmare. We have a plant in Germany where we segregate altogether 77 different scrap types by chromium, by moly, by nickel, by chromium, nickel, by chromium, nickel, moly, and so on and so on. So this is now actually, instead of uh, separating scrap with low copper, low moly, in this case we go to the other side and say, here we have molybdenum, nickel inside. We can save on ferroalloys. And that's necessary because ferroalloys have a terrible footprint. You see here 13 tons, 8 to 13 tons for ferronickel, 8 tons for ferromolybdenum. And the worst case is actually ferrovanadium, which has a footprint of 60 tons CO2 per ton ferrovanadium. Finally, this is a process which my group has started 2 years ago. We have purchased land in France, and here we want to collect uh, uh, byproducts which are part of our process, like dust, like sludges from pickling lines, like scale, but which still contain nickel, chromium, and those elements. And we want to collect this kind of byproduct, melt it again, and create by this our own alloys, which will not be very clean because you cannot 100% separate chromium from nickel and so on. And that's why we will only use them as primary alloy, which means the alloy for the AOD converter. Electrification, we know uh, electrification makes sense where you have electricity mix with a low CO2 emission factor, like we have here in Quebec. This is one of our plants in Canada. Where we have hydropower, all green energy, the CO2 per megawatt hour is less than 10 kilograms. It's also similar in Switzerland, where I'm calling from today. We have a part is nuclear power, and the rest is again hydropower. In France, it's still okay, but look at Germany. Germany has a terrible footprint of 381 kilos CO2 per megawatt hour. So if we start electrification in Germany, and let's say we electrify of a heat treatment furnace, we would actually worsen our footprint because the presently gas-fired furnaces, natural gas has a CO2 emission of 190, 180 kilogram CO2 per megawatt hour. So still better than the electrical mix of Germany. What we see here is a heat map for renewable energy on a spot price. So when you see a low here, what we see here on the x-axis is the year from January to December, and on the y-axis we see the time during the day. And of course, there is a green window in summertime, let's say from 11 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock, where we have available a lot of sunshine, or we have wind, or we have both. And that's where the renewables kick in, and that's why uh, also the prices which you see here, the prices are quite attractive for us. Now in Germany, you see during 24 hours, you have two peak times. One is in the morning when everybody gets up and drinks a coffee. One is in the evening where we go home. And our government in Germany says, if you as a steelmaker promise not to produce in these high demand windows, we will give you a big discount on the grid costs. And the grid costs, this is not the consumption like what we pay in megawatt hours. It's just what we pay every year for the kilowatt. The kilowatt which are being made available as to us. As an example, we paid 130 euro per kilowatt per year in Germany in 2024. And these 130 turned into 200, more than 200 this year. And our melt shops, they have 100,000 kilowatt, which we need for our furnaces, and which means we have to pay on the 1st of January 13, 14 million euro. And this year it's 20 million. So this means if we promise not to produce in these high peak windows, then the grid cost can be reduced by 60, 70, up to 80%. So as a steel maker, we can choose between pest and cholera. Uh, the nice thing, of course, we have less grid cost, but the problem is when you have a discontinuous process, when you stop twice per day, you have cold furnaces, you have cold, you don't know what to do with your people, so you cannot send the people the shift, the people home and so on. So electrification, as we see here, for example, in one heat treatment furnace, with Cantal elements. This is what we do in Canada, where we have seen where we have very low, very low emission factor for electricity. Now, as a quite a big company, we don't need in the what will be the future? Will it be electrification or will it be hydrogen? That's why we do both. We also take part in the HyDreams project, which is a multi-million research uh, project where gas burners are replaced by hydrogen in the steel industry. So luckily, we have been using electric arc furnaces, so we are quite on the green side. We have some additional efforts which we put into our decarbonization. So this means we sell green steel to selected customers. And how do we define it? For stainless steel, we say we want to have a scrap content of at least 95% or vice versa. We want to reduce the ferroalloys by not more than 5%. And for engineering and tool steel, we say we will have a green steel. So we buy we buy green steel certificates. And this we have been doing quite successfully. So last year we won the German Sustainability Awards, and our SBTi decarbonization targets, they are monitored by third parties, by Carbon Disclosure Project, by EcoVadis, by SBTIs, and so on and so on. Here you see the areas where we work in. We work on digitalization, electrification, process improvement. This is our day-to-day business. Recycling, this is what you have seen, what I was mentioning before, and also by substitution, like alloyed scrap for alloys and biogas and oxygen instead of air, and so on. Many things need to be done, and in order to transform successfully, we need, as a steelmaker, we need some preconditions, all of us, which is a planning security, which we do not have in Germany, for example. We have election, I think, coming up this week. So far, in the last 2 or 3 years, we had the Green Party being on power. Who knows what's coming next? We need a lot of green energy, competitively priced, which was also not the case in Germany. Technical solutions we have. We have a wonderful, very outstanding companies, equipment suppliers, technology providers, and so on. There is a national investment program. I know it in France. It's not so much in Switzerland, but in Germany as well. But if I look at how the subsidies are being allocated, I'm afraid this is not the way it should be. And there is a demand from customers for green steel, but the customers, they want to have green steel, but they don't like to pay too much for it. So there is a risk that steel makers, they shift productions into other jurisdictions. For example, 150 years ago, where did we build plants? Where there was iron ore, where there was coal and limestone and waterways and so on. This is not the criteria anymore today. Today, you rather look where do you have green steel? Maybe you know HyDreams, which is being built in Sweden. Another plant is being built in Spain, where there's a lot of photovoltaic energy. You look for jurisdictions where you have less regulations on environment, like the USA, like Canada, and where we have access to recycled materials, mainly scrap. And the final thing is everybody promises deregulation, but it's not happening. Here on this graph, you see, it is not in the European Union, uh, how many new acts are being added to the existing ones per year. It's around 500, and only the courageous one from us would say this is declining because in the end it's not. And what is an act? It's a guideline, regulations, directives, decisions. So there's a lot of bureaucratic, uh, regulatory made for good reason and in good faith, but they really limit our ability to focus on, let's say, on making a business a profitable business case. So here we have in European Union, we have 60,000 civil servants. Many of them are bureaucrats, highly paid, well educated, probably smart, and their only job is to make new regulations. So it took me a little bit longer. I'm sorry, but there's so much to talk about. And, this was a very quick overview. You can also talk about each detail for hours, I believe.
Thanks, Berhard. So we can listen to you for hours, yes. And so I have thinking that it's just 15 minutes, but it's already 40 minutes was the presentation. So, can we allow to the audience to ask some questions? Yes, for maybe 15 minutes. Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I
Yes.
have question. The first question, Berhard. So today, steel industry is facing problems. Yes, we understand it. And what do you think that is it good time today for this transforming the industry? So we don't choose the time, but let's say, would you prefer to postpone it like Trump can do it, or so? What is your opinion?
Well, first of all, I have a personal opinion, and then of course I have the
Yeah.
company vision.
Mhm.
Our company vision is quite clear. With these SBTI targets, we have to reduce our footprint until 2030 by 30%, until 2038 by 95%. So this is clear. The question is, I have a split heart for this because I see, I showed you the contribution of Germany compared to the other countries. It's a minor pollutant of CO2. And if Germany, or let's say EU, if we jumpstart and we go ahead, we can take over the role as a pioneer, as a front runner. But if nobody joins us, and I'm talking about the big steel, big steel making countries like
Mhm.
China, India, USA, then in the end, we will be left with the cost and the other ones will make the
Yeah.
profit. And
Yeah.
that's why I believe the way, especially it has been done in Germany, where you allocate billions in the steel industry without real sense. And I believe this is overdone. Decarbonization, yes, but with a certain care. This is my personal opinion.
Uh, you told that different region so has have this different regulation, and the European Union, especially Germany, like is a benchmark for decarbonization. Yes, but it's like how fair is burden of decarbonization for European companies? Because it's very costly. Yes, and the second question, if you can you tell that additional cost for decarbonization activities per 1 ton of final product, if it's like if it's open information?
Yeah, first of all, I think I can give you some hints, at least referring to the German industry. If you buy a GOES, guarantee of origin, so let's say green electricity, which you can buy, you pay
Mhm.
approximately 5 to 8 euro per megawatt hour. Yeah, and then you get a certificate telling you the electricity you are using is green, is coming from
Mhm.
renewable sources. So this is, I would say, is kind of uh, limited cost. So, for example, our products, as we said, we make special steel. We sell between 1,500 and 5,000 euro per ton of steel. So this part is something which we can absorb. When you build, for example, as I introduced before, when we want to replace ferroalloys by taking residuals from scale, from dust, and so on. So when we need new technology, of course, we need a capex. So the plant which I was introducing in France is Ugering, would cost approximately 100 million euro. Do you get some subsidies? Yes, you would get some subsidies, but still, this is a significant portion for us. So it's difficult to partialize and say this is what it costs you to buy or to sell green steel, because there are so many levers. When it comes to Germany, unfortunately, I mean, I'm proud of this country, but the German, we have an idea. We know exactly what we do not want. We don't want this CCS, carbon capture storage. We don't want nuclear energy and so on. So we don't want this. But at the same time, we buy nuclear pink electricity from France when we don't have, or we power up new lignite and coal-based plants which have a terrible footprint, and they actually are the reason why the CO2 footprint or the emission factor for electricity in Germany is so terrible compared to France or Switzerland or Canada or other countries.
And Burkhard,
I have a question I can ask.
Okay.
Since everybody is complaining about green steel, and I'm talking about producers, are complaining they aren't getting green steel prices. So should the government start requiring a certain % of green steel in every car?
Well, probably I'm rather on the libertarian side. Personally, I believe a government should involve as little as possible into the industry or into a business, I would say. Yeah, I think the motivation for these electrical vehicles is more and more driven by the customers. So if the customers want, and I can see the customers, they want this kind of electrical cars, to the demise of my company, because I told you, in a diesel engine we have 200 kilos of steel, of our steel. In the electrical vehicle will drop down to approximately 100. But I would not say that the company should, the government should interfere into this, and they do. They do in Germany by subsidizing electrical cars. At least that's what they do. But they do it even more in China. So many times in China, my wife is Chinese. So in China, they build infrastructure. They also give subsidies on electrical vehicles, and that's why they are the front runners in EV production. Yeah. Personally, I would say no, but it's happening all around the world.
Okay. Thank you.
Why is Elon Musk? He's the richest person in the world, but his wealth is coming from subsidies given on Tesla cars by the American government.
Thank you. We have another question. If Europe goes even deeper into green energy remelting while using hydrogen, which also requires higher steel scrap purity, could not it make us less competitive as a continent compared to America, which is starting to use fossil fuels again?
Yes, it would, absolutely. Because as I said before, the hydrogen at the moment, it's a dream. Our government promises us green hydrogen in sufficient quantity at a reasonable price by 2030. But I would say 2030 is around the corner. And when we talk about a 5 to 8 or 5 to 10 dollar or euro per kilogram, this is still more expensive than what the US pay for their fracking gas. In Germany, we have a plant in the US, we have a plant in Chicago, Finkel Steel. I think the price for natural gas is $15 per megawatt hours, because there's low tax on it, low transportation cost, friendly jurisdiction, so you can make fracking almost wherever you want. And that's why we also have the CBAM, or that there will be the CBAM. So this means we want to have a levelized playground, saying so if somebody wants to import steel from outside, he has to pay for the carbon difference. Well, you will not find any American company, or not many American companies want to export their steel into the European Union. It's rather the other way around. Since there is a shortage, there's still a shortage in the US. I think the USA still produces less steel than they consume, and that's why everybody wants to export it. But for companies like coming from China, or this will be the CBAM, which they have to pay if they want to bring their products to Europe, which is on one hand fair, but on the other hand, it poses again a lot of paperwork which we have to do.
Mhm. And during the transformation, we forget about people, for example. Yes, transformation is like a change management of changes, and people, you have to motivate people inside of company to change something. Yes, and did you face some problem, because metallurgy is a conservative industry, we know it. Did you face some problem inside of the company to motivate people to find the way to change? Because transformation is not just about top management, it's about all company, about all workers. And what practice did you use for that?
Yeah, we are right in the beginning with this. I think last year was the first time that we published a kind of sustainability report. This is where you see what kind of goodies the companies are doing for ESG, for environmental, and for their people and for their communities and so on. The young people we see, they are very open to it. Our FTEs, our workers, our managers are not yet so much exposed to it, because when you buy green steel, for example, this guarantee of origin, this goes unnoticed, so we don't see this. But there needs to be a mindset change, definitely, and I see that the young generation is more open to this than people of my age. I'm 61, so.
Okay, okay. So
I do have one more question.
yes, Christopher.
Looking for from like scrapyard perspective, what would you advise for European scrapyard recyclers to concentrate on? Would what recycling yards should be concentrating more on investing in various technologies to increase the purity? Because as you told us that foundries will require a better purity steel, or should they actually look for bigger quantities and start exporting it in the future?
Yeah, I think this is a very central question, because fact of the matter is, I think the European Union still exports 20 million, 19 million, 18 million tons of scrap annually to countries like Turkey, to Egypt, but also to Pakistan, I believe. Yeah, so significant portion. But this is a scrap, as you said correctly, which we in Europe don't really want to have. It's the E1, E3. It's a post-consumer scrap with high impurities, which can be either other metals like copper, nickel, moly, but it can also be plastic coating. It can be wood and color and paintings and so on. So I'm 100% sure that the shift for big steel makers like ThyssenKrupp, like Salzgitter, like Saarstahl, to electric steel making, they will not only use DRI for once they have the electric arc furnace in place. When they will play around, they will see, okay, I can use 100% DRI, but I can also blend my mix with scrap. And to be honest, that's what they're doing now on the converter. On the converter plant, you also add 18, 20, 22% of scrap, of cooling scrap into the converter. So with this electric arc furnace, they can increase the range from 0 to up to 100. And I can promise, and let's say like this, typically those Salzgitters, ThyssenKrupp, First Alpines, so they're the big ones with blast furnaces, they supply the auto body. And auto body, so the bonnet and the car frame. And this is a deep drawing application where you need to have very clean steel, so low copper. And what is low? Less than 0.08, 0.06, molybdenum of 0.04%. So very, very low. And if you as a scrap dealer, as a scrap processor, if you managed to turn your scrap into such a high quality scrap, either by keeping the scrap you get from different sources segregated, or by a purification process like this spectrography and this training, then you will be the winner. Because I mean, it's no surprise that the pre-consumer pure scrap is for good reason is more expensive than the post-consumer. And the demand, I can promise, the demand will be there. I don't know, Salzgitter will go on stream in 2 years if everything goes to plan. Although now, at the same time, also in Europe, the ArcelorMittals and others, they are hitting the brake a little bit, because they say, hey guys, we are talking about millions and billions of money, and until we don't have political stable decision making, then we will not invest our money in hydrogen. And then in 2030, you tell us, oh, this hydrogen is not here. It will take another 10 years. With hydrogen is problematic. The transportation, as I said before, you cannot produce green hydrogen in Europe, so we have to import it. And there are these wild ideas getting it from Australia or from Namibia, and for transportation you change it into ammonium, yeah, so NH3, because the NH3 is liquid at -20 degrees and hydrogen at -200, I don't know, 250. So the NH3 you transport to Rotterdam, then you change it again to hydrogen before you bring it to the end consumer. This is a very advantageous and a very demanding project, which can easily be promised by a politician. But let's be honest, in 2030, at least in Germany, not many politicians of today will be around in 5 years' time.
Berhard, thanks for your presentation. It's thanks for your contribution. Yes, and it's very interesting and very useful information for the audience. And wish you all the best in this transformation. And happy to see you at conferences. And yes, thanks.